Welcome to Unit 1 of Introduction to Philosophy. In the textbook, you should have read about the different branches of philosophy and about Socrates as well. I want to kind of cover some of the highlights of that and explain it in a little more depth. One of the things that I've discovered students seem to have the most trouble with in philosophy is that there aren't any definitive answers, or at least rarely. There's lots of different opinions, lots of different suggestions. We can argue back and forth, but it's really difficult to come to any conclusive answers. But that's okay. In fact, I would say that philosophy is more about the questions than the answers. Why do we study philosophy? Why is it important then if it's not about answers? It's about understanding the world around us a little bit better, and it's about understanding the world within us a little bit better. In the textbook, there's a discussion about how philosophy can be practical in the sense that it helps higher test scores, helps critical thinking, and things of that nature. But I think it's also very important in helping us find meaning in our own lives. So I wanted to give you an example of something I ran across actually in the book South Park and Philosophy, which I thought was really interesting. In the introduction, it says, in 2002, there was a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case, and it ruled that the inclusion of "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance is unconstitutional. So the question is, do you agree? Take a minute and think about that. Okay, stop. Forget about the answer right now. What I want you to do is focus on the steps that any ordinary, reasonable person should take in order to answer this question. Well, there are really a couple of steps we could take to get started. We could look at the Constitution. We could research the history of the phrase "under God," or we could actually read the decision from 2002 that the Court of Appeals made. However, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that that was not the first thought that most of you had when I asked you whether or not you agreed with the decision. You probably thought it through and immediately came to a decision about whether or not you agree. Why is that? We very much live in a culture that's you decide, right? So we're given some scenario, some issue, gun control is the big one right now, and we're asked, do we agree with this? Do we support gun control, or are we against it? And instead of researching the issue, weighing both sides carefully, we just decide. We go with our gut on it. That's not always a bad thing in every situation, but sometimes it's important to really look at the details. There are better and worse ways to make decisions. The biggest thing that I think is important to realize in philosophy is that it's okay sometimes to say, I don't know, right? We live in a culture where we're expected to have an opinion about just about everything. But you know what? We don't know the answer to everything, and that's okay. It's okay to think through an issue from many different sides, or to put your opinion on hold. The important thing is to develop a strategy to try to come up with a way to discover that answer. And it's also okay to change your mind. Okay, the other big thing I want to talk about is Socrates. You should have read a lot about his death to begin with, and then a little bit more about his life. One of the things I've realized is that a lot of students don't tend to initially grasp why it was that he was really put to death. So I want to talk a little bit about that first. If we were in class in person, what I would do is ask you guys as a group to come up with a definition of a chair. See if you can think of a definition for a chair real quick. A lot of times somebody's quick to shout out, well, it's something you sit on. And of course, if we were using the Socratic method, we could come back and say, well, yes, so is a couch, and that's not a chair. So the idea is coming up with a counterexample, right? So now we're going to try to fine-tune our definition, like the people who Socrates questioned did also. What is a chair? Well, it's something you sit on that has 4 legs. Okay, well, a bar stool also has 4 legs. So we want to say that a chair is different than a bar stool. So we can go back and forth, changing this definition, and trying to find something that is essentially a chair. And that was really the mission of Socrates. Now you'd be surprised. Trying to come up with a precise definition for a chair that doesn't also include something else turns out to be really difficult. Try it for a minute. Start thinking of definitions of chairs and then see if you can think of any counterexamples or anything else that would fit the definition. It turns out it's pretty tough, which seems strange because when I say chair, you presume you know what I'm talking about. So think about that for a minute. If it's that hard to come up with a definition for a chair, how much harder is it to come up with a definition for these more rich philosophic terms like what is good? What is the good life? What is love? Right? When we start getting into these topics, it's only that much harder to really come up with a definition for them. Socrates' whole mission in life was to push people who should know definitions to terms and ideas that they worked with in their life and show them that they really didn't know that. Okay, so yeah, maybe you're thinking, okay, that sounds a little bit annoying, but let me give you an example that I use in class to really get this point across. I wish I could do it with you guys here, but we can't do it when we're not in person. What I do is reenact the trial of Socrates, but use modern day laws. So I have one group of students be the prosecution and one group of students be the defense. And then I have someone play Miletus and someone play Socrates. And we reenact this trial. Everyone who's not participating in the trial up front, the rest of the students are the jury and they have to make a decision. I tell the class that if the jury can come to a unanimous decision at the end, we'll open up some candy and end class early and be done. If not, we're going to have the trial again if there's a hung jury. The trick is, as I'm handing out instructions, I pass one student in the jury a note saying that no matter what, they cannot allow a unanimous decision in the trial. It's their job to make sure they don't do it. So if you've read the play or seen the movie of 12 Angry Men, it might remind you a little bit of that. So what happens is we have this trial and the teams argue back and forth and generally there's a consensus that starts developing among the jurors. It can go either way, but I have that one person who's always going to hold out. What happens is all the other jurors get really angry. What's happening is that juror asked to disagree with everybody else is playing a bit of a Socratic role. When you're just trying to get on with your life and achieve some task, having someone there constantly questioning you, constantly disagreeing with you can be really annoying. And when you experience it that way, it's very different than just, say, reading about Socrates in the textbook and thinking about it abstractly. Imagine you're on your way to class and somebody starts questioning you. It can be really annoying. And that's why everybody was so frustrated with Socrates. To reinforce that a bit, I want to read a brief passage from Socrates' Cafe by Christopher Phillips. He says, "At certain junctures of the Socratic dialogue, the forcing that this confrontation entails, the insistence that each participant carefully articulate her singular philosophical perspective can be upsetting. But that is all to the good. If it never touches any nerves, if it doesn't upset, if it doesn't mentally and spiritually challenge and perplex in a wonderful and exhilarating way, it is not Socratic dialogue. This forcing opens us up to the varieties of experiences of others, whether through direct dialogue or through other means like drama or books, or through a work of an art or dance. It compels us to explore alternative perspectives, asking what might be said for or against each." And that passage really sums up what I want you to get out of class as well. I really want you to embrace this Socratic method, the way Socrates approached life, right? Force yourself to examine these perspectives, to really embrace them and try to set out your own views. I hope this class will touch some nerves with you. I hope it will make you even a little bit uncomfortable at times, because when philosophy is at its best, that's what it will do. I hope that gave you a little more insight into some of the background and mission of philosophy as well as Socrates. If you have any questions at all, please let me know.